Our mission is love. Our vision is love. Jamaicans for justice. The people's champion, champion, champion. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, Jamaica demand. Right to life, right to liberty. Justice, justice for all. Justice under the law. Justice, the people demand. Right to life and security. Oh, what a job. Oh, what a peace. How great this country could be. Respecting your rights. Respecting human rights. What a wonderful nation this could be. Out of many we are one in a Jamaica. Make it a better place for the boys and girls. Created equal by the creator. For equal rights and opportunities. No to unlawful detention. And police brutalization. Happy Monday, happy Monday. Welcome to another episode of Let's Start Justice. It's exciting this week because we have Glenroy Murray, who is the Executive Director of Equality for All Foundation, formerly JFLAG.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Glenn. It's good friend and colleague here. And our policy research and advocacy manager, Jade Williams, she's out in Montego Bay for the Mario Dean trial, and I will give some update on that in short order. But just to indicate for our listeners what we're going to be discussing this week, we're going to be focusing on the LGBTQI plus community and how they interact with the police and vice versa. What are some of the concerns, how far we've come with the relationship with the police, and so on. Mm-hmm. Yes, Glenn?
Very interesting stuff. Obviously, as an organization that has been focused on the LGBT community since our inception, interacting with the police has always been a big issue for us. Work has been done on both sides over the years. We've gotten to, just not to preempt too much, a decent place, but there still is a lot of work that needs to be done. And I'm happy to say that that work is being done with support from certain sections of the police. So we'll get into the details of how we get to the ideal that anybody should be able to make a report without any issues and have their cases fully resolved.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. All right. So one of the did you know that we have is the diversity policy. But I'm going to plug that did you know to have that as part of the discussion for today. But let me start with the work that Jade would do for you is the giveaway. The trivia for today is name the policy that guides police-citizen relations. Name the policy that guides police-citizen relations. My voice is a little bit hoarse, so forgive me. All right, so you have it up on the screen there for those who are joining via YouTube. Now, before we get into the topic, I just want to share some updates with our listeners. I indicated at the start of the program that Jade Williams, our policy research advocacy manager, as well as other team members from JFJ, my apologies, they are down by the Westmoreland Circuit Court for the Mario Dean trial. So one of the things I just want to say firstly that JFJ, we welcome the significant development in today's court proceedings where a 7-member jury was successfully empaneled to hear the case of Mario Dean. We heard from the judge the last time that we can expect the matter to be heard and fully wrapped up within a month. So we're hoping that by early April, Mercer Fraser, the mother of Mario Dean, can see justice as she sees it. But certainly not having the matter heard and the delays that we have had in the St. James Circuit Court, it was unimaginable pain that the mother had endured. So this is a welcome development here from JFJ. And it's important that we recognize collective advocacy. JFJ, we have been supporting Miss Fraser, her own strength in this process where every year she puts together a protest in Montego Bay, letting the public be reminded of the justice that was being delayed for her son. We've seen the support from the media as well. And can I say that the support from Justice Bertram Morrison, who was the judge at the St. James Circuit Court, doing his own advocacy in pushing for the matter to be transferred to where it is now in Westmoreland, is a welcome development. And again, we hope that there will be no significant delays that will cause the matter not to be heard within the month that is scheduled. So again, this is a welcome development. And one of the things that Miss Fraser said to our team, she says that she feels like this is going somewhere and that she needs some closure. So 10 years have passed, but Miss Fraser is in a better place today based on this development. So again, just to let the listeners be aware of what is happening.
Yeah, and I think, if I may, Mikhail, I
Yes.
think as a nation, there's a level of buying in, understanding what happened and what justice will look like for Mario Dean and his family. It was a very stark reminder of some of the challenges that exist within our detention systems, some of the gaps, and I think finally we can get to a point where we can hash out some of those issues and hopefully come to a level of resolve, not just for the family and those who are immediately affected and they're the primary concern, but to the wider society so that we're assured that things like these don't happen again.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned that, Glenroy, just to segue into the week that was for us, which continues. Last week, our board released a statement following the police commissioner's response to our calls for the body-worn cameras and the concerns that we have on the rising numbers of fatal shootings by members of the security force. Today, the number stands at 59 people killed since the start of the year, and 22, my apologies, 3 in March alone. And remember, today is March 3. So this is a 168% increase when you compare it to the corresponding period of 2024. So we continue to echo our concerns. Last week we had Commissioner Hugh Faulkner on the program. You heard yourself. He's also concerned about the increasing numbers, and he also reiterated Indicom's call for the body-worn cameras. He was also on Smile Jamaica this morning, I believe, and he again made a similar call. I note that the Prime Minister, Dr. Andrew Holness, made a statement over the weekend, and I won't mention the meet the judge part, but I will say that certainly there is some balance in the statement, and I'm thankful that the Prime Minister noted it, that yes, we all welcome the significant decrease in murder, where I believe since the start of the year we have 47 people who were killed, quite significant reduction when you compare it to the past 2 to 3 years. And the Prime Minister also noted, and I want to read a line, our security forces must have the monopoly on the use of force on behalf of the state, and our security officers must therefore strive in every interaction with the public to demonstrate that they can be entrusted with that responsibility. It's a balanced statement, but I think sometimes one of the things I would urge our leaders to do, sometimes we have to speak a little bit more forcibly on things that could undermine possibly rule of law, because I think we conflate a demand for accountability with somehow, undermining our security forces, not supporting them, and so on. And I would say to us that a call for increasing police accountability should never be seen as anti-police, should never be seen as that. It's the so-called alarmist approach that, we're being accused of, and the bravery of families of victims that have led to the establishment of Indicom in 2010. JFJ, we have our place in history there. So when you talk about relevance and so on, let us remember that civil society, we have always been at the fore of institutional change in this country. And the public, I know we live in a time where the crime rate is high, but we have officers who, for the most part, they're very good, dedicated. But we must recognize that there are a few that sometimes will undermine the good work of the collective, and therefore accountability must be a call for all of us while we support law enforcement.
Yeah, I've had my own public comments on this situation in social media. I have little doubt that the majority of the police force are following the rule of law, in terms of making sure that when they are in situations where lethal force has to be used, that it is valid. I'm not even questioning that. My concern is the narratives that end up in the public domain about the situation, because we know where we're coming from as a society and as a nation. We're coming from a society where we had to create an indicum, where there had to be an additional layer of oversight, and there are other levels of oversight like iProbe and so on.
Yes.
And I think we shouldn't pretend that we just created those things for no apparent reason. And so I see the calls that JFJ and others have been making around the body-worn cameras, as a part of that general direction that we've been going in as a society, just to make sure that everything is on the up and up. I understand that for some people, the call in the midst of a high crime rate might seem a little bit critical or overly critical for some of them, because for them they're seeing levels of results. But I think we can continue to achieve these positive results in our response to crime in this country by continuing to support the police, strengthening their investigative capacity, strengthening their training, whilst at the same time holding them to a standard where everyone everywhere is able to to respect the police. I think as a nation, a lot of the challenges that I've heard from police themselves is that, they don't get a lot of cooperation. They don't get people coming forward and being witnesses and so on. And a part of that is the relationship between police and everybody on the ground.
Yeah.
And so the part that the police will have to do at all levels is building that trust, so that we are sure that when you say we did this thing and we used lethal force, that it was legitimate. And here's a proof that it was legitimate. And once we get to that culture, then not that we won't still ask for the body-worn cameras, but that our first thought wouldn't be, I wonder if. And I think that's unfortunately where we have been coming from, where sometimes you hear something, you're like, I wonder if. We shouldn't have to wonder with our police force. And in my mind, they've done a lot of work to improve how things are done. And I think as a nation, we should be able to celebrate those improvements with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking about accountability, Glenn, one of the things I've had the privilege of speaking to law enforcement officers in the United States and elsewhere. And what I like with their body-worn cameras, the footage from that, it is uploaded via YouTube channel. So there's complete transparency. So while you balance privacy rights and due process rights and so on, so there is no statement to add to any narrative. You're just simply releasing the footage to say that this particular matter is being investigated. You'll be so apprised of the outcome. The last time we had on the show DCP Clifford Blake of iProbe, and he mentioned to us that the JCF is moving towards the stage where we can have the disciplinary procedures be made public. And that is quite important. So we need to have an appreciation of, if a law enforcement officer, if they do X, this is what will be enforced. And then you get an update on it. Because the absence of that information would lead to people saying that there is no transparency.
Interestingly, you talk about making body-worn camera public.
We have to take the break. So
Okay.
hold that thought.
Sure.
Revamp your space with unique living, sleek fixed and sliding shower panels, shower systems and faucets, stylish vanities, LED and non-LED mirrors, basins and kitchen sinks, closet and storage solutions, hanging aids, and more. Available in different finishes and sizes to match your style. Transform your space and visit us today at shop number 630 Dunrobin Avenue, Kingston 10. Call us at 876-755-3661 or visit our website at uniquelivingja.com to shop.
Hey there, commuters! Big news! Your JUTC SmartFare cards are here! It's time to swap out those old Smarter cards and step into the future of easy, efficient travel. We know transitions take time, but let's get started. Here's how. Grab your Smarter card and your ID. Bring it to any JUTC ticket office. We will then switch you to a SmartFare card. Top up and voila! Your brand new SmartFare card is ready to roll. No stress. Your balance moves with you to your sleek, upgraded SmartFare card. So, out with the old, in with the new. Right, with SmartFare.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Justice. We're here with our co-host for the day, Glenroy Murray, who is the Executive Director of EFAF, Equality for All Foundation. Glenn, you were making a point?
Yeah, no, so, I mean, in my spare time, I like to watch reality TV. And one of the shows I watch famously is Real Housewives of Potomac. And there was an incident where one of the cast members was drunk driving, essentially. Mm-hmm. And it was the body-worn cameras that proved that the police were right, that that person was drunk driving. And that led to a conviction. And so my perception, and the sentencing was significant because it was like...
That's Karen.
Yeah, Karen. Okay. So you know the show. But the point that I'm making here is I've seen body-worn cameras being used in a different space to support police investigations, right? In situations where, for all sorts of reasons, potentially other types of evidence might become destroyed or lost in chain of custody or whatever it is. Things can happen. So I see this as a tool that can help investigations. I understand, though, that the thinking that it will also exonerate or confirm what's happening with police also makes some people a little bit skeptical about the nature of the call. But I think it's a net positive for the police themselves.
Yeah.
And I hope that as conversations develop around it, we recognize that it's a net positive.
Yeah. And, just to close out on this, we do the trainings with our law enforcement officers. And I can tell you, not one officer that we've come across have ever said, I don't want the body-worn cameras. Mm-hmm. Quite the contrary. They say JFJ advocate for it because sometimes X, Y, and Z happen. And we need the public to know that we're innocent and we're doing our work with diligence. So again, very good officers that we have out there, and we just need to continue to support them. All right, so let's segue into today's topic. And we've seen some alarming comments. Most homophobic place on earth. That was the adjective, that those words that were used in the past about how Jamaica treats with minority groups. Things are changing, we know. But sometimes we recognize that the interaction with law enforcement officers reflect the stigma in the wider society. So let's start out with, from your perspective as the head of Equality, formerly JFLAG, how do you see the relationship between the LGBT community and law enforcement?
I think it's an evolving relationship. I think we're coming from a place where conversations were strained, where there was a complete level of distrust in terms of whether or not LGBT people felt like they could be supported from police when things happened to them. I think over the years, significant efforts have been made on our part as Equality for All to bridge that divide between the community and the police, and we've definitely had some gains. I know we're going to be talking about the policy, but beyond that, research that we have done has demonstrated that there has been some significant improvements on the part of the police in terms of being more open and being more ready. They've had their moments that have made me uncomfortable in terms of some of the interactions I've seen, some of the actions that they've taken that would put us backward in some respects. But
Yes.
by and large, I see an intentional effort at the highest level of the police force to make the police force a space where all people, regardless of their identity, a space where you can go report and get some type of resolve for any crime that has happened to you. I know that over the years, perceptions around what the laws we have in Jamaica mean for how the police interact shape things, and I think we no longer have that. People don't think, well, let me not say that. Generally, police don't have the view that because of a certain law, they can't treat with the community. But more work can be done in increasing understanding, and that's some of the work that we're currently doing.
So, in terms of the interaction with law enforcement, we're all citizens. We all need the police in different ways and spaces. But is it a case wherein, for example, you may find that, for example, a member of the gay community, the Gully Queen situation, speaking to members of the trans community who are homeless, how is that interaction there versus if an individual experience domestic violence? How do the situations differ in terms of how police, behave?
So the general presumption, and this is based on research that we've actually done in terms of the perceptions that police have of our community broadly, and the general association that a lot of police have is that all of us as members of the LGBT community are the Gully Queens. And so there's this assumption that if you come forward with a story, or you go to report, or you're one of those people, and it might shape that interaction. But in other regards, and the truth is, all of us don't look the same. There are queer people that look like myself, and there are others who look differently. And if you show up, not necessarily being visibly queer, as we say, then you might be able to have a very positive interaction with the police, because maybe what you're reporting is not necessarily directly related to your identity, and you get through fine. I mean, I've gone to the police station with a previous partner of mine who was robbed. It was a very positive experience. They took it, they were very respectful, move on. But I can imagine in certain circumstances, and the other part of it is that sometimes members of our community do go to the police station expecting a negative interaction, and so they do adopt a persona sometimes. Not all of them, but some of them do, and it also colors that interaction. The unfortunate thing, though, is that there's a stereotyping. So there might be 2 out of 10 members of our community who act that way, but everybody then becomes a broad brush, and that's often where the challenges are.
So from what I'm getting, it seems if an individual is effeminate, if you will, or social class issues may be at play. That's what you're saying?
Absolutely. So if you are an effeminate gay man, but a certain kind of effeminate gay man, because for many people I'm considered effeminate.
But you're dressed well in that spiffy red jacket.
Right. So the interaction is going to look different, even if I'm there with my partner and we obviously have a relationship. And we go to the police respectfully. But if you're effeminate, and then how you're presenting in terms of, in the words of the police, we weren't able to verify this, but we know it happens. We've seen a few videos. There's a level of loudness, there's a brashness, there's a brusqueness when you're talking to the police. Then it might shape the interaction a little bit. The problem often comes into play when, even if that's not what you're presenting, and I'm not saying that if you present as that, then you should not be engaged with by the police. Let me make that very clear. Regardless of how you present, I think a part of the work of the police is to support the community and find ways to de-escalate. But a bigger problem is a lot of people, if some police perceive you as being a member of this community, their immediate thought is to associate you with a certain set of behaviors and either not want to be interested in the report, not want to engage, step away, maybe have potentially a female police officer specifically take the report. So it's those kinds of things that come into play.
Yeah. So we know the situations in the past. We've done the research. When I was at Jamaica Aid Support for Life, we did a research and we did a comparative analysis between how members of the police view the community versus healthcare workers. And you found the stigma levels to be extremely high, within the law enforcement cohort. I remember there was a particular question that said a gay man should be locked up. Do you agree or not? And on one of the responses, the person who completed it, responded, crossed it out and said, should be killed.
Oh.
So that was alarming for us. But subsequent research that was done, you see an improvement in the attitude towards the LGBT community. And that's the same that your research is reflecting at Equality.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we can start with mentioning the policy itself. So in 2011, the JCF policy on diversity was implemented.
Excellent policy.
Perfect policy. Well, not perfect, but it was a really good way to begin this conversation that years later we're still on that path that essentially said when certain people from certain groups and identities are reporting, there's a process and that there's a level of respect that they should be treated with. And I think what that policy forced, so to speak, was a different kind of conversation of how you interact with different people. And to be clear, this policy is not just about the LGBT community. It's about different religious groups. It's about social class. It's about different categories of people. What our research shows, though, is that the perception among the police themselves, even though a lot of them know the policy, they're trained on the policy, which is great on the police academy's part, is that the perception is this is just about the queer community. So that's part of the work that needs to be done now because, of course, if you're...
So once you hear the word diversity,
you think about us.
Yeah.
But that did at least begin conversations and it created an avenue for organizations like Equality for All, like JASL and others, and JFJ, to begin to do trainings around the policy and get them to appreciate how do you implement this policy respectfully, even if you have a particular view and a belief that means you're not necessarily quote-unquote in support of the community, but how do I do my job respectfully? And I think what we're seeing now where even though we still have situations, and based on our research, we have 58% of community members in the last research we did saying they have negative experiences, there's at least a solid 40 that have positive experiences, which is a massive improvement from where we were coming from before, where there's a certain level of distrust. And I think that has everything to do with the work that has been done.
Yeah. One of the things, Glenn, listeners, that and you touched on it earlier, the Jamaica Constabulary Force and its academy, it ought to be lauded for how they approach training of their police recruits. So, for example, once you have a new batch or any session on human rights, they would extend an invitation to several agencies.
Including ours.
Including Equality for All Foundation, Jamaicans for Justice, Jamaica Network of Seropositives, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities, Combined Disabilities, because again, it's touching on the broad group of what diversity means. People with disabilities, much included. Women, especially poor rural women, it's also touched on there because we recognize that different group will face different issues and you need to interact accordingly. So that is a positive from the JCF that I think we should collectively join a round of applause there.
Yeah, highlight, celebrate, as a government institution, the police force has done the work. And when I say they've done the work, they've not just created a policy, they've implemented a policy, and they've tried to some degree, I'm not going to give them a full 100%, but they've tried to put in the work to institutionalize how it's rolled out.
Yeah.
And there's a willingness from some quarters in the JCF currently, and I can share some about some of
Right, hold that thought,
Sure.
and then let's take the break.
At the Jamaica Customs Agency, we care for our employees, customers, stakeholders, citizens, and our country. Customs cares. The temperature by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
29 degrees Celsius here in Kingston and 28 out west in Montego Bay.
People of Westmoreland, come out to Icon Megastore in Sablamar, Friday, February 28th, with a Tasty Beat Easter promotion. The Tasty team will be live with cheese specials, deals, and super discounts. We have the rhythm and the tins for you all Easter. Come out and get your tasty cheese.
Tasty Beats with tasty cheese.
Join the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC, on March 4 at the Transport Center in Halfway Tree as they launch their campaign, Smart Fare, an exciting new initiative designed to improve your commuting experience. Cliff Hughes Online will be broadcasting live from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., bringing you the latest updates. Then tune in to E-Zone from 3 to 5 p.m. for more coverage. Be there for all the excitement and stay tuned to see what's in store. So don't miss Cliff Hughes Online from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and E-Zone from 3 to 5 p.m. live from the Smart Fare campaign at the Transport Center in Halfway Tree. It's going down on March 4. Be there. All this and more. Only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, your route to excellence.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're discussing the matter of LGBT plus community and police relations. We're joined by Glenroy Murray of Equality for All Foundation. Glenn, please finish your thought, and then I want us to respond to some of the comments in our YouTube chat.
Yeah, man, sure, no problem. So I was going to say that I was acknowledging the level of work that the JCF as a collective have put in. Not only have they developed a policy, they've implemented it, and they've built partnerships with stakeholders to make sure that the policy works. And I think what therefore needs to be worked on, and what we're trying to do on our end, is strengthening that relationship. Because what I've often find is that a lot of members of my own community aren't as aware of the policy. You know, we did some trainings in the past, and every now and then you have to do refreshers. And because of how our communities often operate, if one person has a negative experience, then that spreads like wildfire, and then it colors everybody's perception of what can happen with the police.
Yeah.
And so we're currently doing the business of having sessions with our community, having police as facilitators come in, and we've done it in the past, and talk about the policy, talk about what the community can expect. Because the through line that we've seen in the research that we've done is that there is a level of distrust on both ends. Police expect a certain interaction from our community. The community expect discrimination from the police. And the truth is, these are both stereotypes that both groups have of each other. And the only way that we can begin to fix that is if we both come to the table and be honest about our experiences, honor what the other side thinks, and see how we can come to a resolution. And I'm happy that at different points we've had police being willing to have those kinds of conversations, because it can only be better for our community to have the police on our side. And so I'm happy. I mean, I was at a session in Montego Bay over the weekend, a nice room of 20, 30 members of our community, and a very charismatic member of the force as a sergeant. And they were really able to connect on people being able to have their rights, but also not just have their rights, but be respectful in their interaction with the police, being mindful when they show up to the police station. There are certain things that do happen, of course, and the one I'll flag is there was a practice that sometimes some members of the force would video members of our community when they're interacting with them, because once again, some of them tend to be very colorful and expressive, and then that gets uploaded to social media and spreads. And it's about addressing, that's going to create a level of distrust because you're exposing people.
But beyond the discrimination in that instance, because we flagged that as a concern recently, Glenn, there was a video that I think it was in St. Anne of two men wherein they were recorded and seemingly being shamed by officers, which, as you know, could have put the lives of those two men at risk. So that's a broader issue for me in terms of the standards of the force, and you know, the whole thing with the TikToker recently, and whether or not the police should be recording and then uploading, which clearly they shouldn't.
Right. And they do have a social media policy that was shared with me that they shouldn't be doing that. So it's about how do we then make sure that we're making the connections and connecting to the relevant authorities within the police, probe the different entities, so that the standards that the police have are evenly implemented.
Yeah. You know Jacqueline Dillon of the Domestic Violence Intervention Center, and we've had conversations with her, and based on feedback from her and her officers of the DVIC who would respond to domestic violence, matters, there seems to be improvement there. Because in the past, some of the things we've heard from law enforcement is that somehow same-sex relations are illegal and therefore you can't respond to it. But there seems to be a change in attitude and the responsiveness coming from JCF officers, in particularly those at the DVIC. How is your experience there when you're talking about domestic violence matters?
When we talk about, and I know that there's this perception that when it comes down to our community, domestic violence is at a higher level. I don't think the data doesn't show that is true. But I'll say two things. One, there's this misconception that because of the quote-unquote buggery law that the police can provide certain services. The buggery law criminalizes anal sex across the board. And so this idea that because the buggery law exists, then we are not allowed to exist in this country is false. It's not what the law actually says. And there's a better understanding of that amongst police. What has been reported to us by the police through the research that we've done is that oftentimes our community members don't do the necessary follow-ups because of the sensitivities. Domestic violence is already a tricky issue in our country. There's a lot of shame around it. There is an added level of shame when you're a part of a marginalized community. You might not be out to certain people. People might not know your identity. And to go through a process of public record, so to speak, people might shy away from that. And a part of what we're going to have to do with our community is kind of encourage them that if you really want justice and if you really want the system to work for you, is figuring out how do you begin to show up in this process. If you make a report, follow up, make sure you get your receipt, make sure that you do the statement and you carry it forward. So then the police won't have it to say, oh, whenever it's time to follow up, they don't answer and they don't show up. Because to the extent that some police are trying, I think we do have a responsibility to try with them. But yeah, that's where a lot of the issues are, is that people don't necessarily follow up.
Oh, by the way, to our listeners, I'm being reminded, obviously, but I'm being reminded that you can call in at 630-937-124. That's 630-937-124. 618-8255. 618-8255. And you can raise your concerns or comments on this particular topic. Glenn, is there any comment from the YouTube chat that jumps out at you?
I mean, I saw a more recent one. I won't say who, but somebody talking about the term that originates from the United States. And I think it's important that we talk about the fact that this community is not new to Jamaica. There have been queer people in Jamaica for years. There have been LGBTQ plus people for years. And we have done the work as an organization to document our history. Our movement started in the 70s. And even before that, their research shows, poems from the 20s, concerns about queerness in this country.
When I was doing my master's degree, actually, it existed all the way slavery.
Right.
So
There were some discussions in the 50s about which particular entity was being perceived as having a lot of queer people. It's always been a reality. No, there's a lot of new language around our experiences that we share with communities across the world. But there have always been queer people in Jamaica.
Yes.
And if anybody wants the written history of our community as we have it, I can share that with you. It's in our Pride magazine. And we did our 10th issue last year. So I invite some of the people commenting to learn a little bit more about the history of this community.
Question to you, Glenroy. Is there a difference? So we know we have different groups within the LGBT community. Gay men versus trans women. Can you explain for people the difference? And when you do your explanation, just guide me through whether or not they're treated differently by law enforcement.
Sure. Gender and sexual diversity 101, as we say. Gay men, those are people who identify as men who are attracted to primarily other men. And then the lesbians, which is the L, those are women who are primarily attracted to other women. Bisexual people are attracted to, men and women in the simplest way. When we talk about trans people, we're talking about people who identify with a gender identity, whether they see themselves as men or women, different from how they were assigned at birth. And when we say assigned at birth, we're talking about when the doctor essentially says this is a boy or this is a girl. And if you're a person who, even though the doctor said, oh, this is a girl, but you identify and you see yourself as a boy, that's a trans person, a trans man specifically, as a doctor said girl, but you're a boy. And if the doctor said boy, but you're a girl, you're a trans woman. And when it comes down to that community, the trans community generally in this country, because of how they show up, meaning they're obviously members of our community. If you start to affirm your identity, and when we say affirm, you dress a certain way, you might wear makeup, you might do a few wigs and so on, then it's obvious that you're not the norm, you're not heterosexual. And they oftentimes do, not just with the police, but with other public services, get a harder time because the level of discomfort is there. As we talked about before, you could be a gay man, but you could be more masculine, and so it's not obvious. And so even if the police finds out in the middle of the process, they might, engage a diversity policy, speak to you privately, get the sub-officer involved. But that's can be dealt with easily without a lot of attention.
Yeah.
When a trans woman shows up, in her wigs and her nails to the police station, then there are these fears that sometimes police and other people in this country have, that if I talk to this person and if I treat them well, then obviously I'm amongst them. And it's them trying to make clear that, I'm not a part of this. That's where the stigma and the discrimination often manifests.
A little bit more. All right, we have Debbie on the line. Debbie, you can go ahead.
Hi, Miss Jackson.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you and your other host.
Mr. Murray, yes.
Hi.
Mr. Murray?
Hi.
Okay, because actually I was listening partially to the program, but I had to be on the phone at the same time to another entity trying to save my life. The commissioner needs to discipline his police force, especially the Spanish Town police. They cannot be the wrongdoers in the community. It is driving me insane. I got no sleep for the entire weekend because of the dance that they're a part of and people lying to the IPO personnel who try to put a stop to it. or the 119 officers. The commissioner needs to investigate and do something about this issue. It's been going on way too long. No one has confidence that anything is going to change in the area because of how long it has been going, but it has to stop because it has affected my health so badly. I feel like right now I have no use to my body. I have not slept. When I mean not slept all weekend, I mean I have not slept.
Have you said that you made reports, Debbie, to iPro?
Yes. It, I can't say everything on here. I spoke with you, but I don't want to divulge everything on air. Let me just look at Miss Denny right now. I tried to speak with you earlier before you left office, but I really hope that I could dialogue with you when you return.
All right. Given you spoke to a member at JFJ's office, I will follow up and then we will reach out to you. All right. We have to take the break, Debbie. But please let us connect.
Problem.
All right. Thank you so much for calling.
The national budget is everybody's business because it impacts every Jamaican. The time brought to you by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service is
14 minutes going up to 2 o'clock.
Hey there, commuters, big news! Your JUTC Smart Fare cards are here! It's time to swap out those old Smarter cards and step into the future of easy, efficient travel. We know transitions take time, but let's get started. Here's how. Grab your Smarter card and your ID. Bring it to any JUTC ticket office. We will then switch you to a Smart Fare card. Top up and voila! Your brand new Smart Fare card is ready to roll. No stress. Your balance moves with you to your sleek, upgraded Smart Fare card. So, out with the old, in with the new. Right, with Smart Fare.
Join the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, JUTC, on March 4 at the Transport Center in Halfway Tree as they launch their campaign, Smart Fare, an exciting new initiative designed to improve your commuting experience. Cliff Hughes Online will be broadcasting live from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., bringing you the latest updates. Then tune in to E-Zone from 3 to 5 p.m. for more coverage. Be there for all the excitement and stay tuned to see what's in store. So don't miss Cliff Hughes Online from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and E-Zone from 3 to 5 p.m. live from the Smart Fare campaign at the Transport Center in Halfway Tree. It's going down on March 4. Be there. All this and more. Only on Nationwide 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by the Jamaica Urban Transit Company, your route to excellence.
Welcome back to Let's Start Justice. We're here with Glenroy Murray, Executive Director of Equality for All Foundation. Glenn, any other comments in the chat? I see you laughing at some. The ones that you could respond to.
I mean, the only thing, I see a lot of people misunderstanding what we're trying to do here. Well, not necessarily a lot, a few, to be fair to the listeners and to the watchers. What we are doing here is talking about how well the police has done in improving relations with the community and how much more work that needs to be done that we're getting their support to do. And I'm happy for that, and I'm happy that we're continuing on that path. I will point out, as I say that there's a difference in the Kingston and rural divide. Obviously because we have a more visible community in Kingston, so the police interact with us way more as queer people, whereas in rural Jamaica, I mean, even in the research that we did, their perspective was, well, this is not really an issue for us. That's a Kingston issue because we don't have queer people in rural Jamaica. Or they don't come to us. But it is a rural issue. There are queer people everywhere in this country. And they want to feel like they can step forward. But the situation is a little bit different in a rural context because people know people and they might not feel as confident coming forward with their issues. So that's one thing. But just to quickly respond, our community, as I've said, has always been here, and we're just asking for equal access and equal opportunity. And we will continue to be here. Our organization has been around for 26 years, and we expect to be around for 26 more.
Do you recall any instance, Glenn, wherein a complaint was made by a member of the community and there was follow up by the force to say that this is the outcome of an investigation?
So in the research that we've done, there is a I have the report here, the Secure Injustice report. It's on the lower end, but there are cases where a person says, yes, follow-up was done. Yes, they got a positive outcome. So even though a lot of members of my community do shy away, we've seen situations where some of the people who make the reports and see it through do get at least some level of outcome, whether it is what they wanted or not. There is some level of interaction. Because as we know with policing here in Jamaica, there are larger systemic challenges that don't necessarily relate to your LGBT identity. Maybe, they just don't have the investigative capacity for whatever reason. But there has been follow-up, and I think that's also another good thing to highlight.
Yeah. Question for you. The matter from a legislative standpoint, we know that the police, they have their diversity policy, and we have seen the improvement. But should we be getting to a stage wherein our constitutional rights respect and recognize that we have diverse groups in our society, as well as the call that we've been making for the anti-discrimination law? Would those things help from where you sit?
Absolutely. I think there's several legislative changes that need to happen. I think I would be remiss if I didn't reiterate our long-standing call for an amendment of our anti-sodomy laws here in Jamaica so that consensual intimacy between persons of the same sex, men in particular, is not criminalized, and that's for if you're an adult. Even though it's not necessarily enforced largely against my community, it's still there, and it still affects people's perception, as we've seen in the comments. But I share your view. I mean, when we started back in 1998, one of the first things we did as an organization in 2001 was push for the recognition or the prohibition of sexual orientation discrimination in our now Charter of Rights. And we'll continue to do that whenever we get to phase 2 in the constitutional reform process. We've consulted with our community, and we already have our submission just waiting for that to happen.
Even though those matters will not be touched, according to a former cabinet member. Yeah.
Whichever, we will be still raising the issue. And we stand in support of the call for anti-discrimination legislation, especially because it in the same way we've seen a positive policy have great interactions within the police force. We want to see that across the board. Our work as an organization has seen us interfacing with other government institutions, some more responsive than others. But the good thing is that whenever we do trainings with members of the public service broadly, the outcomes are positive because people learn, people understand, and people get to appreciate that what we're asking for is just fair treatment.
Yes.
And they can appreciate that. And so I think legislatively, if we have something in place that makes it a standard, like what the police have, then the training that these people get coming into the different agencies would be standard. And then it would build a level of confidence in our community. So I can go back to my community and say, go on, try out the service, and if it doesn't work, let us know and we'll work it out.
Yeah. One of the things I hasten to remind listeners, we can't say we're a strong democracy, but we have minority rights being ignored or trampled upon. So this is not, let me clarify, about the agenda pushing and agenda setting. Yes, we all have an agenda here for human rights groups. We have an agenda that we will respect the rights of others. We have an agenda that nobody should be subjected to inhumane treatment. That is our agenda as human rights organizations. We're not trying to force anything upon anybody, but it's just to be respectful, show a little bit of respect, and so on, especially for state actors who are carrying out their duties. That's all the agenda that we have. for our listeners who have a little bit of a discomfort with
Yeah.
today's topic.
And I understand. I mean, at the end of the day, we know the culture that we're raised in. I know people were brought up in a way that they should have an issue with this. But the good thing that I've seen, and we have research that proves this, is that the attitudes are changing. We're seeing an increase in positive attitudes. The data now stands at 32% of Jamaicans have a more positive attitude towards our community. And I imagine that would be growing. And that's because there's been dialogue and interaction, and there will continue to be dialogue and interaction, because I think once people understand that what we're asking for is just a fair and even space, then it becomes easier for people to support what we are doing and what we're calling for. And that is not to say that there isn't work for our community. Of course there is. Our community does have work to do, and that's why a part of what we do is encourage them to play their part.
Yeah.
But it doesn't take away from the fact that the services that the state offers must be inclusive. And technically, our Constitution guarantees that everybody should have fair, equitable, and humane treatment by public authorities. So it's already a constitutional mandate, and it's to make that a practice across the board so that no LGBT person, whatever service they're accessing, especially when your rights have been violated and you go to the police, that you feel like you can't access that service.
Do you see a difference in the age groups that would perhaps treat the LGBT community a particular way, whether good, bad, indifferent? Is there a difference?
Yeah, and the report actually says it. So older police officers tend to have more of a challenge with, implementing the policy
Stuck
fully.
in the old ways.
Yep. But the newer, and I think that has to do with the fact that the policy came in while they were already in the force. I think newer police officers are trained under the policies. They're likelier to interact with members of the community. And so you'll see a greater willingness. And they also came up in Jamaica where these conversations were happening. So I think that's also a part of the distinction. But that's very much like what we're seeing in the general public. Our younger generation, and even to quote our study that we did on the general attitudes, positive attitudes among youth populations is over 50%. So we see what a future Jamaica could look like for our community if that trend continues, where there'll be growing at least support and tolerance and respect for our community as we continue to grow as a people.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, so you have the platform, Glenroy. What is your outgoing statement to listeners who are saying, listen, we're not for this, God set the world a particular way? Where are we pushing this narrative on our children? What is your outgoing statement as we close out?
I think the outgoing statement is a call to re-examine what our motto means. If our motto is out of many one people, as we proudly say everywhere, then there must be space for people who love differently, who express differently, to be able to function in this country. And the truth is, we've low-key always as a country have been able to create space for other people despite how different they are. And we're already on this path. Sometimes we don't even recognize how further along the path we are than some other countries in this world. And let's continue the conversation. Reach out if you want to know more about the LGBT community. We are equalityjamaica.org. You can read the research there, and you can reach out to us at EqualityJA on all social media platforms. Learn a little bit more, and we're always ready for a conversation with church groups, with different citizens groups, anybody who wants to understand the experiences. We're here to share and to also learn from you to see how we can better support.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That was Glenroy Murray, Executive Director of Equality. Before I close out, I just want to indicate the beauty and strength of advocacy. For those who are paying attention to the Joint Select Committee sitting for the Integrity Commission, you would recognize that they've accepted one of our recommendations to make it possible, again, where the Integrity Commission, as could have happened with the Office of the Contractor General, can now publish contracts, who got them, the amount that they got, and that is a good step for transparency in the country. So kudos, because Section 56 prevented that from happening based on our understanding of the legislation. So very, very important. The trivia winner for today, or the correct answer to our trivia question is JCF Public Interaction Policy. And the winner is Ari Anna Mommy World on Instagram. She won. Thank you so much. That's it for Let's Talk Justice today. My name is Michael Jackson.
And I'm Glenroy Murray.
Have a good week, and we will see you next.
4524 or JamaicансForJustice.org. The People's Champion.
It is said relationships in the professional space can easily become very friendly and formalities can become frolicking fun. How difficult is it to keep the lines clear and the boundaries in place? Seeing each other daily 9 to 5 might make for the majority of time shared between two who are attracted to each other.